turn it over to Don and Scott, or Don and Leon. Scott and Leon Schumacher.
Right, thanks. Make sure I get my screen sharing going on here.
There you go.
All right. So, yeah, thanks for having us. Good afternoon. I'm Don Scott. I serve as the Director of Sustainability for the National Biodiesel Board. The organization I work for is a non-for-profit that exists all because of some research that was done on a diesel truck almost 30 years ago. Joining me this afternoon is the principal investigator on that very research, Dr. Leon Schumacher, engineer and professor at the University of Missouri-Columbia. Leon, why don't you say hi to everyone so we can get a chance to link the faces and voices of our presentation this afternoon.
Hello, everybody. It's been a few years since we started down this path, but this path has been growing every day. So I teach at the University of Missouri in Columbia, Missouri. I work with a group called Ag Mechanics kinds of folks. Actually, we call it Ag Systems Management. And that really boils down to, if I say it in reverse, that really is how we work. We're managing systems in agriculture. Biodiesel was one of those that we worked on. So,
thanks, Leon. Biodiesel is a substitute for diesel fuel that's made from vegetable oils or animal fat instead of petroleum crude. Most biodiesel today is sold as a blend with diesel fuel. Blends below 5% biodiesel are very common, and blends up to 20% are becoming more common in some areas. I'll talk more about the specifics of biodiesel later, but I wanted to begin with the truck that started it all. This is a 1991 Dodge Ram D250 with a 5.9 liter Cummins turbo diesel. Apart from the engine that really changed the way consumers think about diesel pickups, there's not a whole lot remarkable about this beige beauty. It's certainly not as old or as beautiful as the trucks we see in Wheels of Time or at the ATHS National Convention and regional meets. The reason I wanted to share this story is because this ordinary looking pickup was part of a change that will affect all trucks, old and new. I also wanted to introduce myself as an ATHS member. I've been a member for about 7 years, but I've been a fan of old trucks my whole life. I'm not a truck driver. My father-in-law is a beekeeper, which pretty much makes him a trucker that hauls bees and honey. These are a few of his trucks that I help him maintain. And these are some of the trucks that my father's cared for over the years. You might guess that he's a Ford man, but I was raised to appreciate anything that's old and had wheels. This was my first truck, built entirely from parts. It's not a very big truck, but you can see I like putting it to work for utilitarian purpose. Over the last 30 years, I've played with many old trucks. To tell the truth, I wasn't very good at adjusting a carburetor, and I grew tired of cleaning points. The B-Series Cummins also made me a believer in the reliability and consistency of diesel power. After the Second Gulf War, I personally became concerned about fuel prices and the future availability of fuel, not only to drive our old trucks, but for the essential needs of transportation, public safety, the delivery of food, and everything else that drives our economy. That's why I joined the staff of the National Biodiesel Board in 2007. I believe that farmers could contribute to make our fuel supply more reliable, and that we should take action to ensure that our own future, rather than remain victim to how Saudi Arabia or Russia conspire to force prices up or down, depending on whether they want to extract profits or power from the United States, or whether they want to dump fuel in our market to drive out domestic production. Not everyone at the staff at the National Biodiesel Board is a diesel mechanic, but on several occasions we have built diesel engines together. We built several B-Series engines just for fun, starting with a bare block and building an engine that we could run on a stand. I first met Leon in 1991. I was a freshman in agricultural engineering at the University of Missouri. Leon was working on some novel research to run a diesel truck on biodiesel made from soybean oil. The incoming freshmen were shown this as an example of how agriculture could contribute more to the U.S. economy and how science and engineering could be important to new advances. The biodiesel industry has come a long way since those days, and everything we do has built on that research. It would be a full decade after Leon's original research that biodiesel started to enter the market commercially. Today, we make and use almost 3 billion gallons of biodiesel each year in the U.S. One of the questions I get frequently in my work at the National Biodiesel Board is how might we expect the biodiesel industry to continue growing? So to answer that question, I reflect back to our beginnings. Understanding why the biodiesel industry started tells us a lot about where we are going. And it really starts with the food supply. The key ingredient to our food supply is protein. Even as we consume protein from meat and dairy, all the protein in our food supply ultimately comes from plants. Plants are powered by solar energy, and they're really good at storing that solar energy in seeds. So when we harvest those seeds for our food supply, in the process of collecting enough protein from those seeds to satisfy the needs of our food supply, we coincidentally collect more fat and vegetable oil than we can eat in ratio to that protein needed for healthy nutrition. These pie charts compare the ratio of calories in a soybean compared to the ratio of calories needed in our diet. Today, global population is growing. The demand for protein is growing. So soybeans produce more protein per acre than any other crop. So expanding soybean production is the best way to produce more food for a growing world. As far back as 1991, farmers realized they must find another use for all the soybean oil that will result from feeding a growing world. Some farmers had returned from Germany, where they were using industrial rapeseed oil to produce biodiesel in Europe. This inspired the Missouri Soybean Merchandising Council to propose some research to determine whether excess soybean oil could be converted to be sold as diesel fuel replacement. It was relayed to me that the farmers liked the idea enough to fund the research, but weren't committed enough to the idea to purchase a truck. So some folks at the university got creative in using a truck owned by Foundation Seed, which is a seed company that operates within the university system. Only after the initial research proved successful in 1991 were funds identified to purchase a second truck in 1992 on which to conduct more biodiesel research. Leon, at this point, do you want to chime in and confirm or deny any of the stories I've been told about the research on these original trucks?
Most certainly. The pickup that we're looking at right now, we had to buy this pickup. It sounds kind of strange, but the 1991 was in use so much that Foundation Seed really were not able to use it. And we were really at a situation where we were in demand and needing to be at different locations and such. And so you can see some different components here on the right. And what we were in the middle of is we put 100,000 miles on that truck. And after 100,000 miles, we removed the engine and brought it over to the folks at Cummins and asked them if they wanted to give a look to it. So that gives you a little bit of history of that pickup.
Thanks, Leon. So in addition to the two Dodges used by the university, the Missouri Soybean Council eventually purchased an F-250, a Ford, to promote the results of the research. By 1992, the farmers were fully bought in, but the trucks at the university were tied up doing research or hauling seed and equipment for the university's working farm. So they bought this Ford to go on the road and spread the news of what they'd found. Here you can see another photo of the Missouri Soybean Ford on the steps of the Capitol in Washington, D.C. That Ford has since been donated to a high school outside St. Louis, Missouri, where it's used by students as part of an ongoing biodiesel education program. The University of Idaho was another institution where early biodiesel testing was done. Here are some photos of their 1992 BioRam, which continues to be used on campus. Leon, correct me if I'm wrong, but your trucks were primarily fueled with B100. I understand the Idaho trucks tended to be run more on B20 or a 20% blend of biodiesel. Does that sound right?
Yes, there were several of them that ran 20%. There was one that did go 100%, but it was, all of their biodiesel was a canola-based diesel. I'm sure you're going to say more about that. Yeah.
All right, thanks, Leon.
Thank you.
So here's another photo of the Missouri, the 92 Dodge, and a second generation Dodge Ram from the University of Idaho, both running on biodiesel while documenting performance. Even though the biodiesel was the same type of fuel, they were each made from different kinds of vegetable oils. Another early biodiesel adopter was Yellowstone National Park. In this photo is our colleague Jim Evanoff, who's now a retired park ranger from the National Park System. This pickup was just one of their vehicles running on biodiesel as they eventually switched all equipment in the park to run on B20. I want to play for you a brief video from 1992 that will tell you in the words of that time what this research meant to farmers of the day.
Well, it looks like a pickup truck, and it even sounds like a pickup truck, but there is a major difference. This pickup truck is powered by soybean oil, and Kenlon Johannes, Executive Director of the Missouri Soybean Merchandising Council, is the man to tell us all about it. Are we really running this on pure soybean oil?
100% soybean oil that's been altered through a process called esterification.
Have you altered the pickup engine at all?
The engine is not modified whatsoever. It's the oil that's been modified to suit the engine. As we start, we're using new soybean oil. In other words, good, fully processed soybean oil that is somewhat more costly. Now, there may be some other potential uses when there is a crop that produces an off-colored oil. We may be able to use used oil out of a fast food restaurant that uses soybean oil. So we're just getting to the tip of the iceberg, we hope, on this project, and we're going to see how the cost would be in the future.
There is one difference I noticed besides what happens inside the engine. It smells like a fast food restaurant.
Well, we've heard that before, the roving popcorn factory and such, but believe me, that's a nice smell compared to the diesel buses that put out the fumes and the particulate matters and the carbon. And so indeed, in the future, we may measure miles per acre rather than miles per gallon as we look at the growth of ethanol and now possibly soybean oil to power those engines on the farm as well as in town. Our thanks to Kenlon Johannes for a look at that soybean oil powered pickup truck.
The first biodiesel truck continued to be used as a work truck on the university farms until 2002 when the 5-speed transmission went out. Stories I've heard tell me that they worked this truck pretty hard. In those days, the university wasn't required to have CDLs for all their operators, so they used small trucks that anyone could drive to do big jobs. Today, they use semis to do the jobs they were doing with this truck in the late 90s. Those jobs were apparently too big for the transmission, and this truck sat motionless for almost 17 years. In 2018, I heard that the university had plans to repurpose the engine from this truck into something bigger and scrap the pickup. I wanted to be able to say that the first truck to run on biodiesel is still going strong, so Leon pitched in to help me rescue this piece of history. After almost 17 years, we put a new battery in it, changed the oil, and fired it up. We did drain out the old fuel just to make sure we didn't cause a problem, and the Cummins fired to life and runs great to this day. Rather than just replace the old transmission, we decided to set another record with this truck. This is the first Dodge Cummins to be equipped with a Tremec TR4050. This is a 5-speed transmission that's now being sold as an aftermarket retrofit in all sorts of applications. Silver Sport Transmissions supplied us with the transmission and Quick Draw brands out of Ohio built for us the very first Cummins B-Series to Tremec bell housing. They're now offering this adapter kit with their full line of Cummins and diesel conversion parts. We're glad to have the first biodiesel truck back on the road. We've put approximately 6,000 miles on the truck since its rebirth. I want to thank Steve Wilson from the Cummins History and Restoration team for inviting us to the Cummins Centennial Celebration in Indiana last summer. We're very proud to be part of that history, and we hope that we'll be part of the future for Cummins and everyone who relies on diesel power. So the research that was completed by Leon and his collaborators on this pickup truck proved that soybean oil could be processed into good quality fuel that could power a diesel truck. However, there was no commercial industry to produce this fuel. There were no fuel quality parameters or regulations. There were no distributors equipped to sell or blend the fuel. And there were no engine manufacturers who had tested performance or long-term durability on this fuel. So the farmers established the National Biodiesel Board as a nonprofit organization to shepherd the development of all the technical parameters that would need to be developed to develop a commercial industry to bring this fuel to market. It was eventually determined that biodiesel had many advantages. Biodiesel has increased lubricity, which is good for the moving parts of your fuel system. As little as 2% biodiesel is all that's needed to restore the lubricity that was lost when sulfur was removed from on-road diesel fuel in 2006. Biodiesel reduces emissions of particulate matter, unburned hydrocarbons, and other components of diesel exhaust that are harmful to respiratory health. Because it can be produced from local resources instead of imported crude oil, biodiesel is also good for local economies. The biodiesel industry supports over 60,000 US jobs and adds $11 billion to our gross domestic product. Because biodiesel does all these good things, the industry mission quickly transitioned from finding a use for excess soybean oil to finding all of the renewable oils that can be processed into clean fuel that can be produced locally. Today, soybean oil makes up just under half the biomass-based diesel produced and used in the US. Biodiesel can also be made from used cooking oil, animal fats, canola oil, and distiller's corn oil, which is a byproduct of distilling corn to produce alcohol. Biodiesel is the most diverse fuel in production today because it can be made from so many different types of fats and oils. Biodiesel is produced in all of these locations across the country. This table identifies the fuel quality parameters that must be met for biodiesel to be blended with diesel fuel and sold as a legal motor vehicle fuel. These properties and limits were developed in conjunction with the fuel distributors and diesel engine manufacturers to ensure optimum performance and reliability of biodiesel in the field. Biodiesel provides similar performance to diesel fuel. Biodiesel generally produces the same horsepower, torque, and fuel efficiency as conventional diesel fuel. Biodiesel has higher lubricity. Biodiesel generally has higher cetane than standard diesel fuel. Biodiesel produces less soot. Biodiesel can be used in vintage diesel engines as well as modern common rail technology. We recommend that biodiesel be used within 1 year. Test results have proved that biodiesel can remain in spec for up to 3 years, but we recommend using biodiesel within 1 year to provide a factor of safety against anything going wrong in the supply chain. These logos represent some of the popular brands that support biodiesel use. All US diesel engine producers approve blends of biodiesel of at least 20%. And here are more engine and vehicle manufacturers that approve blends of at least 20% biodiesel. Globally, every engine manufacturer approves at least 5% biodiesel blends. The European light-duty engine manufacturers have tended to limit their approval to the blends commonly sold in Europe, which are in the range of 7 to 10%. Volkswagen issued some regional approvals up to B20 in the states like Illinois and Texas, where B20 can be quite common. Blends up to 5% biodiesel are very common and generally do not carry a label identifying biodiesel. If it contains more than 5%, federal law requires a label similar to this, identifying it as a blend. Next, I'll show you where it's most common to encounter these labels. 11 states have passed mandates to require some minimum level of biodiesel. The New England states require biodiesel blends in heating oil for home heating. Those mandates do not impact on-road fuel. The most significant of all these mandates is Minnesota, which began with a 2% blending requirement years ago and has ramped up to 20% blends in the last 2 summers. This requirement drops back to 5% during the winter months. These states have economic incentives to blend biodiesel. Blending is not required by law, but often makes retail fuel cheaper or more profitable for the distributors. The incentive structure is different in every state. For example, Illinois waives the 6% sales tax on blends over 10%. So there's a lot of 11% biodiesel in Illinois because it reduces the cost to consumers by eliminating the sales tax on the entire gallon of fuel. Finally, these states have implemented or are developing policies to reduce the carbon emissions from transportation fuel. Biodiesel reduces net emissions of greenhouse gases by more than 75% compared to diesel fuel. That's leading to blends of biodiesel and renewable diesel becoming increasingly common in California and Oregon. It's under these policies to curb greenhouse gas emissions where biodiesel presents a real economic advantage for the trucking industry. If trucking continues to emit greenhouse gas emissions, operating in California will become increasingly expensive. And there are reasons to believe that these policies will be replicated in other regions as well. Biodiesel is the low-cost option for reducing emissions in trucking. All other options are either impractical or more expensive. The reason biodiesel is so effective at reducing greenhouse gas emissions is because biodiesel stores solar energy. Plants store solar energy as they grow. When we use vegetable oils from plants, we can power our diesel engines without taking carbon out of the ground and then add it, which adds carbon to the atmosphere when it's burned as a fuel. As an example of the changes that may eventually come to the trucking industry, this graph shows the emission reductions from EPA's proposed heavy-duty truck rule. They seek to achieve 1 billion tons of carbon dioxide reductions by 2027. So to achieve these emission reductions, EPA must force transition of the entire fleet to a new kind of truck. Various technologies, including streamlining, weight reduction, and engine technologies must all be combined to achieve these targeted reductions. Here, the greenhouse gas reductions from biodiesel are charted alongside those reductions EPA intends to achieve by transitioning the fleet. This shows that we can achieve half of the greenhouse gas reduction in the fleet of today simply by switching the fuel. So biodiesel brings flexibility. You don't have to make any significant changes to the trucks that are on the road today in order to use biodiesel. For jurisdictions like California, which will require greenhouse gas reduction, biodiesel can save truckers $1 per gallon in operating costs compared to other greenhouse gas reducing technology that will be required. Operators don't have to change what they're doing. States like California are setting greenhouse gas goals, and they're already implementing biodiesel blends at the pump. States like Minnesota and Illinois are doing the same. Midwestern states may be motivated by economic benefits more than emission reductions because they understand that producing fuel in state means more jobs and more economic activity in that region. So you can't have economic growth without trucks, so fueling with biodiesel creates a virtuous cycle that keeps America moving. I hope all that made sense. I got into biodiesel because I didn't want the availability of fuel or the cost of fuel to impinge upon our ability to rely on trucks and heavy-duty trucking. It's been a lot of work to advance biodiesel, from the days of research by Leon and his collaborators to the continued work with engine manufacturers and fuel distributors. We continue to make sure that biodiesel performs great in the field. We continue to make sure biodiesel brings benefits to the environment and the economy. I hope we will increasingly see the option to use biodiesel blends as a money saver for truckers, and I hope more people will take pride, as I do, that their fuel is locally produced. So,
thank you, Don and Leon. That was great. Anybody have any questions for us? Go ahead and get them in our Q&A or in chat box, or raise your hand. Don't forget to raise your virtual one, not your real one. The only one I can see are Don and Leon's. But yeah, let us know. I've learned so much about biodiesel. I had never even thought about where it came from. I knew about it.
Well, thanks for the opportunity. We're sorry we're not all in one place in Illinois, but this has worked out well.
Yeah, we're kind of sad. I'd like to be with all the trucks.
Yeah.
So I have to say, it's supposed to be raining in Springfield today, and I don't miss parking trucks in the rain. Because that gets cold and yucky after a few hours. Steve Simon asked, older engines, no degrading of internal parts or lines?
The only thing to worry about on older engines is natural rubbers. So around like 1994, the auto industry moved away from natural rubbers to more modern elastomers. With a B20 blend, you really don't have to worry about it. If you were running 100% biodiesel, in the course of a few months, you would see those rubber hoses soften and start to weep. So the elastomers is the only thing I would be concerned about. So if you're building a truck or working on a truck and you go to a parts store, they are almost always carrying good quality hose these days, but never hurts to ask for it specifically. So if you ask for like a Gates barricade that has a liner in it that's resistant to all the modern fuels, that's a good move, because some of that cheap older rubber could degrade over time with biodiesel.
Great.
We actually ran this in some older tractors, and the only real issue we bumped up against was patience in so many different ways, because getting the product to the location sometimes was the biggest challenge. So, yeah, it'll run on an older engine, believe me.
That's awesome. Be interesting.
Mm-hmm.
Great question.
And I like the nice beige pickup. It reminds me of all those pickups we rode in kids.
It is a sweet old truck.
Yeah, but that transmission really wasn't the stellar piece of equipment.
It's always something, right?
Yeah, I took two
It was
transmissions out of the 1992 myself, so, and I have never ruined another transmission ever, so I don't know what to tell you about that.
The new transmission in the Gold truck is fantastic. That Tremec is really, really quick shifting. So it's a nice truck.
Awesome. All right, any other questions? We have a quiet crowd this time.
Well, thanks for the opportunity. Thanks everyone for the attention.
Absolutely.
Yes.
Absolutely.
Thanks.
I appreciate it. You guys were troopers when we started this, and we built our way through that first one together, and now we're on our sixth webinar. I don't know. I've lost count at this point.
Great.
Well,
Well, good luck.
appreciate it. And guys, make sure you check out the virtual truck show. Hours of trucks to look at. Literally, there's over 6 hours worth of video. Yeah, don't forget to check out some of our stuff tomorrow and Saturday. Got things going on. Come in about half an hour. We're going to have another trucking story time. You can talk about that guy. You know, that guy. Because we all have one. Maybe it was that guy who drug you kicking and screaming, I don't know, Don, into the trucking industry in the world that you now live in.
I volunteered.
But you always have that one guy you have a story about. So that's what we're going to be talking about in about half an hour. So come back and join us. And everyone else, thank you for being here with us. And we look forward to seeing you down the road.
Thank you.
Bye.
Take care. Thanks a lot.